Her screams cut through the quiet suburb like a knife. My little girl, trembling, crying, was pinned against our iron gate by a woman twice her size. Karen's manicured hand pressed hard on her fragile shoulder, the metal biting into her skin. "You think you can break HOA rules just because you're special?" she hissed. My daughter's wheelchair tilted, her eyes full of fear, her voice breaking. "Please, it hurts." The neighbors watched, frozen. No one dared to step in. Then a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. A man in uniform stepped out, eyes burning, jaw clenched. That man was me. I was about to show this HOA queen exactly who she had touched, because the woman she just attacked wasn't just my daughter. She was the daughter of the assistant commissioner she had proudly reported last week. Before I begin this story, tell me, from which city are you watching right now? Drop your city's name down in the comments. I love seeing how far our community reaches across the U.S. globe showing America's. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what happened next will leave you speechless. All right, let's begin. We had moved into Willow Creek Estates just 3 months ago, a neighborhood that looked peaceful, with clean lawns, smiling faces, and a homeowners association that claimed to protect community standards. My daughter, Emily, loved it here. Despite being disabled since birth, she had the kind of spirit that could light up a room. Every morning, she'd wheel herself to the front yard to feed the stray cat that waited by our fence. But peace never lasts long when people like her are around. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president. Perfect hair, pearl earrings, a clipboard always in hand, and a heart made of stone. From the first week, she started leaving warnings about our unsightly wheelchair ramp, about excess decorations, even about Emily's laughter being too loud for community hours. At first, I ignored it. I thought she was just another bored neighbor obsessed with control. But deep down, I felt something darker, an obsession growing in her eyes every time she looked at my daughter. And one evening, that obsession turned violent. What happened at that gate, the moment Karen snapped, would change everything, not just for her, but for everyone who believed they were above the law. Because sometimes justice doesn't knock. It arrives. The first few weeks in Willow Creek felt almost too perfect. Wide streets lined with trimmed hedges, children riding bikes, and mailboxes gleaming under the morning sun. It was the kind of neighborhood you saw in real estate commercials. After years of apartment living, I wanted Emily to finally have a backyard where she could feel free. Her wheelchair never slowed her down. If anything, she was the most cheerful soul on the block. Every morning, she'd roll down the ramp I built with my own hands, holding a small bowl of milk for the stray cat she named Buttons. The cat would wait by the gate, tail swaying, as Emily hummed softly while feeding it. It was her little world, peaceful, kind, and full of innocence. But it wasn't long before I noticed the stairs. Across the street behind her white picket fence stood Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed guardian of HOA standards. She was always there, sunglasses on, arms crossed, that permanent smirk of superiority carved into her face. Every time Emily's laughter echoed, Karen's head would tilt in irritation, like joy itself was a violation of the rules. At first, it was small things. A note taped to our mailbox. "Your wheelchair ramp does not conform to HOA aesthetic standards. Please repaint to approved color palette." Then came another. "Please refrain from leaving items, cat food, toys, visible near the fence. It disrupts neighborhood uniformity." I remember holding those notes in my hands, shaking my head with disbelief. I worked in law enforcement, an assistant commissioner, but I wanted to live quietly, anonymously. I didn't want to pull rank or intimidate anyone. I just wanted Emily to live a normal, peaceful life. So I swallowed my pride and let it go. But Emily noticed. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" she asked one evening, her eyes wide behind her round glasses. I knelt beside her wheelchair and smiled. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people just forget how to be kind." She nodded quietly and went back to coloring her sketchbook, drawing a house with flowers and a smiling sun. That drawing still haunts me, because a week later, that same spot, where she drew, would be stained with her tears. Over the next few days, Karen's behavior grew bolder. She started inspecting our property during her morning walks, phone in hand, pretending to record violations. Sometimes she'd stop and point at the wheelchair ramp while talking to her phone like she was documenting a crime scene. The neighbors noticed, but no one said anything. That's how fear spreads, quietly like mold. One Saturday, Emily was feeding Buttons when Karen stopped by. "You know, little girl," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "feeding stray animals isn't allowed. It attracts pests." Emily looked up politely. "He's not a pest, ma'am. He's hungry." Karen's smile froze. "Rules are rules. Maybe your father should teach you about responsibility." That night, I found Emily crying softly in her room. "Why does she hate me, Dad? I didn't do anything bad." I hugged her tight, because sometimes people like her don't see hearts, they see differences. I wanted to report Karen to the HOA board, but she was the board. She ran everything, the meetings, the fines, the decisions. Her husband, from what little I'd heard, worked out of state most weeks. Power made her lonely and cruel. The next morning, I saw Karen walking with her phone again, snapping pictures of her house. I stepped outside, staying calm. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Whitmore?" She turned, her lips twitching into a smirk. "Oh, none at all. Just ensuring community compliance." I nodded slowly. "Good, because I'd hate for anyone to break the law, trespassing, for example." Her smirk faded for a second before returning. "Oh, I'd never do that. I know exactly where the line is." She didn't, because in the days ahead, she would cross every line imaginable. It was a Sunday evening when I noticed something strange. The HOA website listed a new complaint against our address, repeated rule violations, potential misuse of property. My jaw tightened. She was building a case, a fake record of misconduct, and I knew where it was leading. Still, I stayed patient. I didn't want to fight her in front of Emily. But monsters don't stop when you ignore them. They only grow bolder when you stay silent. And on one ordinary afternoon, under the same golden sunlight that once made Emily smile, Karen's cruelty finally exploded into violence. Because that was the day she decided my daughter, my disabled daughter, was a problem she needed to teach a lesson. And she'd make the biggest mistake of her life doing it. It started with a loud knock, sharp, impatient, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer. I opened the door, and there she stood, Karen Whitmore, HOA clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she was holding back a lecture. "Good afternoon," she said, though her tone carried no warmth. "We need to discuss multiple community violations." I raised an eyebrow. "Violations?" "Yes. The ramp color doesn't match the HOA-approved palette. Your trash bins were visible from the street for over 10 minutes last Friday, and your daughter," she paused, glancing down at her papers, "was seen leaving snack remnants on the sidewalk while feeding stray animals." I took a breath. "Karen, that's cat food. She feeds a stray that lives around the neighborhood." Karen smiled in that thin, patronizing way she always did. "That's still a violation, Mr. Cross. Rules are rules." I looked at her, then at the clipboard. "Do those rules also say you should harass children with disabilities?" Her smile twitched. "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm maintaining order. If we let one family bend the rules, the whole neighborhood crumbles." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Emily rolled into the doorway, holding her sketchbook. "Dad, is everything okay?" Karen leaned forward, her expression hardening slightly. "Sweetheart, you should make sure to stay off private lawns, okay? Not everyone likes messes." "Mess?" I snapped. "She's a child, not a pest." Karen didn't flinch. She scribbled something on her clipboard. "I'll be sending a written notice. Have a nice day." And with that, she turned on her heels and walked away, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume and the bitter taste of anger behind. 2 days later, I received an official HOA email, violation notice #2043A. It listed failure to comply with aesthetic standards and animal disturbance on property. Attached was a $250 fine. I printed it out and laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Still, Emily noticed my expression. Did she send another letter? Yes, I said softly. But don't worry. It's just paper. She frowned. But she doesn't like me. I kneeled beside her wheelchair. You don't need everyone to like you, sweetheart. Just remember, bullies always show their weakness through anger. She nodded, but her eyes still carried that quiet sadness. A few days later, I caught Karen outside again, snapping pictures of Emily's ramp. I walked toward her. Karen, I said firmly, you're crossing a line. She didn't even look embarrassed. Public space. I'm allowed to document potential violations. This is my property. She gave a short, fake laugh. Then maybe you should make it look like it belongs in this neighborhood. Her words sliced deep. I could handle insults directed at me, but not when they were aimed at Emily. Before I could reply, she added one more blow. Some of us worked hard to live here, Mr. Cross. Others just bring their problems with them. That was it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Listen carefully, Karen. You may think that clipboard gives you power, but it doesn't. You're a volunteer. You don't make the law. Her smile cracked, but she quickly masked it. Threatening a community officer? That's not wise. I don't make threats, I said, locking eyes with her. I make reports. She stiffened, clutching her clipboard tighter. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. We have standards here. And with that, she walked off, muttering something about entitlement. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she whispered, Dad, can we move again? Those words pierced deeper than anything Karen had said. No, honey, I replied gently. We won't run away. Not again. She nodded, closing her eyes. But I could see the tension in her little hands, the way she gripped her blanket, like she was afraid to sleep. From that night onward, I started parking my patrol SUV outside the house instead of in the garage. Not because I wanted to intimidate Karen, but because I wanted her to know. Still, it didn't stop her. The next HOA meeting, she tried to humiliate us publicly. Neighbors gathered on the cul-de-sac, folding chairs and coffee cups in hand. Karen stood at the front with her clipboard, reading violations. When she reached our name, she smirked. Mr. Cross, as much as we respect your service, you're not exempt from rules. Multiple complaints have been submitted about property appearance and disruptive activities. I looked around. Most neighbors avoided eye contact. Really? I said, standing up. Or is this just your personal vendetta against my daughter? Gasps rippled through the group. Karen's face turned pink. How dare you accuse me? You dared to harass a child. I interrupted, my voice cold. You fined us for feeding a stray cat. You took pictures of my property without consent. That's harassment, Mrs. Whitmore. And if you continue, I'll make sure the county board hears about it. Her jaw tightened. You wouldn't. I would. For the first time, she faltered just for a moment. Then she composed herself and smiled thinly. Have a lovely evening, everyone. She ended the meeting early, but I knew it wasn't over. The way she looked at me, that burning humiliation in her eyes, told me something worse was coming. I just didn't know how soon. Because when obsession turns into vengeance, reason disappears. And the next time she showed up, she wouldn't be holding a clipboard. She'd be holding my daughter against a gate. It was one of those quiet afternoons when the air feels too still, like it's holding its breath before a storm. Emily was outside in her favorite pink hoodie, humming softly while feeding buttons near the gate. I was inside, finishing some paperwork for an upcoming investigation. Through the window, I could see her, peaceful, smiling, innocent. Then I heard her voice. Didn't I tell you before? Karen's tone was sharp, venomous. I froze. The pen slipped from my hand. I looked out the window. Karen was standing at the gate, hands on her hips, barking at Emily like a drill sergeant. Emily's small frame stiffened. I'm sorry, Miss Karen. He's hungry. I don't care. Karen snapped, stepping closer. This isn't your property to feed stray animals. You people think rules don't apply to you, huh? That last line hit me like a bullet. You people. Before I could even move, Karen reached over the fence and snatched the bowl from Emily's lap, spilling milk across her wheelchair and the pavement. Buttons darted away. Emily gasped, startled. "Stop, please," she whimpered, trying to back away, but the wheels caught on the gravel. Karen's face twisted in rage. "Don't talk back to me, you little brat." And then she did it, something I'll never forget. She grabbed the handle of Emily's wheelchair and shoved her back against the iron gate. The metal clanged. Emily's cry pierced the air. I was already halfway to the door, heart pounding. Through the window, I saw neighbors pause, frozen. Some whispered. One man started filming with his phone, but no one stepped forward. Karen leaned closer, her voice dripping with hate. "If you can't follow the rules, maybe your father should have taught you better." Emily was shaking, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Please, you're hurting me." That was it. Something inside me broke. I burst through the front door. "Karen." She turned, startled at first, then her expression shifted to smug defiance. "Oh, here he is, the proud father of a troublemaker. Get your hands off my daughter." Her grip tightened for a second before she released the chair and stepped back, feigning innocence. "I was just correcting her behavior. You should thank me." I cut her off, my voice sharp and deadly calm. "You laid hands on my child." Neighbors began stepping closer, sensing the tension. Phones were out, recording. Karen glanced around nervously. I didn't touch her. She was blocking the sidewalk. "The sidewalk is ours. Karen, you crossed onto my property." Her confidence faltered, but she tried one last desperate defense. "I'm documenting a violation. I have every right." "You have no right to assault a disabled child." That's when Emily, her voice trembling, whispered, "Dad, she pushed me." Silence fell across the street. Even the birds stopped chirping. I stepped closer until I was face to face with her. "You think you run this community? You think your little clipboard makes you powerful?" Karen backed away slightly. I was just enforcing." I pulled out my badge. The gold shimmered under the afternoon sun. Her eyes widened, disbelief painted across her face. "Assistant Commissioner Nathan Cross," I said quietly, "and you just committed aggravated assault on a disabled minor, witnessed by half the street." Her jaw dropped. "W8, you're under arrest." Neighbors gasped. The color drained from her face. "You can't, this isn't." But before she could finish, my patrol SUV came rolling around the corner, my partner, Officer Davis, pulling up after I radioed mid-run. "Sir," Davis called out, stepping out with calm professionalism. I pointed at Karen. "Detain her. She assaulted my daughter." Karen stumbled back, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "This is outrageous. He's using power for revenge." Davis raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, the entire street saw what happened. We'll review the security footage, but for now, you'll come with us." As the handcuffs clicked, Karen screamed, "You'll regret this. I reported you last week for parking your cruiser here. I know my rights." I stared at her, voice low and cold. "You reported me, Karen, but you didn't know who I was." Her expression shattered, the realization hitting like lightning. "You pinned the daughter of the man you reported." I said, stepping closer, "and you'll answer for every second of pain you caused her." Davis led her toward the car as she shouted curses, her voice breaking with fear. Emily was crying softly. I rushed to her, kneeling beside her wheelchair, gently brushing her hair back. "It's okay, sweetheart. She can't hurt you anymore." She sniffled. "Dad, did I do something bad?" I felt my chest tighten. "No, baby. You did nothing wrong. Some people just don't know what kindness is." I looked up. Every neighbor was watching silent, some ashamed, some relieved, some secretly recording for the drama. But all of them finally saw the truth. And Karen? She sat in the back of that patrol car, realizing her reign of arrogance had just ended. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of something even bigger, because what happened next would turn this quiet street into the loudest headline in town. The police car's red and blue lights painted the street in flashes of justice. Karen sat trembling in the back seat, mascara running down her cheeks, still shouting, "I'm the HOA president. You can't do this to me." But this time no one listened. Neighbors who once bowed to her power stood silently now, some whispering, others clutching their children closer. I turned to Officer Davis. Read her rights carefully. She'll try to twist every word. Yes, sir, he said, leading her toward the cruiser. I knelt beside Emily, whose eyes were still wide and wet. Her hands clutched her stuffed bear, something she always carried when she felt scared. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here now, I whispered, brushing her tears away. Her lips quivered. She said I was breaking the rules for feeding Buttons. I took a deep breath, swallowing the anger burning inside me. You didn't break any rule, Emily. You did something beautiful. Some people can't stand seeing kindness because they've forgotten what it feels like. Her tiny hand touched mine. I was scared, Dad. My heart broke a little more. You were brave, I said softly. Braver than she'll ever be. I looked up at the security cameras mounted on my porch. The small red light blinked steadily, recording everything. My jaw tightened. Good. Every second of this nightmare was saved. Within minutes, backup arrived. 2 more patrol cars parked along the curb, blocking off the street. The neighbors finally started talking, fragments of their guilt spilling out. I saw her push the girl. She's been harassing them for weeks. She fined me for painting my fence 2 shades lighter. The entire facade of Karen's authority was crumbling right there on her perfect driveway. Officer Davis approached me. Sir, the footage from your doorbell cam confirms everything. She assaulted your daughter, trespassed, and caused emotional harm. We're logging it as felony assault. I nodded. Make sure it's airtight. She'll lawyer up before sunrise. He smirked slightly. Understood. Karen, hearing that, screamed from the car. I didn't mean to hurt her. She blocked the path. It was an accident. I turned toward her slowly, my voice calm but cold as winter. Accidents don't come with insults. Karen, you called her a problem. You pinned her to a gate. You don't get to rewrite what the cameras already saw. She froze, her words drying up. For the first time, she didn't look powerful, she looked small. An hour later, the officers drove off with her, and the street fell quiet again. But that quiet wasn't peace, it was the echo after storm. I wheeled Emily inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and sat beside her. She leaned into me, her tiny voice barely a whisper. Dad, will she come back? Not if I can help it, I said softly. You're safe now. But my mind didn't rest. I knew Karen's kind. People like her rarely accepted defeat. They clawed for control, hiding behind lawyers and technicalities. And she'd already reported me once to the HOA. I needed to make sure this time there'd be no escape. That night, I opened my laptop and began writing the report. Subject: HOA President Assault and Harassment, Willow Creek Estates. Every detail, every date, every violation notice, every photo, I documented them all. The camera footage, the neighbors' statements, the fines she'd fabricated. It was no longer just personal, it was legal. As I typed, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. I'm so sorry for not stepping in sooner. She's bullied everyone. You finally stood up to her. If you need, witnesses will help. For the first time since we moved in, I realized she'd ruled through fear. And once fear broke, her empire collapsed. The next morning, I drove Emily to her therapy session at the hospital. On the way, she looked up at me. Dad, are you angry? I smiled faintly. Angry, yes, but not at you. Then at who? At people who forget they're human. She nodded thoughtfully, gazing out the window as the city passed by. Will she say sorry? I sighed. Maybe not, but sometimes justice is better than sorry. When we returned home that evening, a black SUV was parked outside. I tensed, ready for another confrontation, but when the door opened, it wasn't Karen. It was her husband. A tall man with tired eyes and a defeated expression walked up the driveway. He removed his hat respectfully. Mr. Cross, he said quietly, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say. I studied him. He looked genuinely broken. She's always been controlling, he continued. I thought the HOA work kept her busy. I didn't know it had gone this far. I nodded slightly. Your wife assaulted my daughter, Mr. Whitmore. This isn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. It's a criminal case. He exhaled deeply. I understand. And for what it's worth, I'm filing for separation. I can't defend this anymore. For a moment, I saw something rare, remorse. Not his, but the echo of what Karen should have felt. He handed me a folded letter. She wrote this before they took her in. Maybe you should read it. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a single page, scrawled in messy handwriting. I never hated your daughter. I just hated seeing someone so innocent when my life was so empty. I thought rules gave me control. Now, I see they just made me cruel. Tell her, I'm sorry. For a long moment, I said nothing. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. Thank you, I said finally. He nodded and left quietly. I looked toward the gate, the same gate that once held my child captive. The paint was still scratched, but the air around it felt lighter. Emily's laughter slowly returned to fill the space. And as the sun set behind the houses, I realized something. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming peace, one truth at a time. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Karen's arrest wasn't just gossip, it had become news. Someone had uploaded the footage from my doorbell camera to social media. Within hours, it spread like wildfire across local forums, Facebook groups, and even a morning news segment titled, HOA President Assaults Disabled Child, Justice Served by Assistant Commissioner Father. The video showed everything, her voice, her shove, her rage. There was no defending it. The comments poured in. How could anyone do that to a child? Finally, someone stood up to these HOA bullies. Bless that little girl, she didn't deserve this. Karen's picture, once on HOA flyers and welcome packets, was now plastered across TV screens and articles with headlines she'd never lived down. At first, I didn't want any of it to go viral. Emily didn't need the world to see her pain. But something inside me whispered that this story wasn't just about us anymore. It was about accountability. 2 days later, I was called to the county courthouse. Karen's attorney had filed for bail. When I entered the courtroom, she was already there, her bright confidence replaced with a gray hoodie, no makeup, and hollow eyes. She looked nothing like the woman who once strutted down Willow Creek with a clipboard. Her lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client is a respected community member with no prior record. This was a misunderstanding, an overreaction taken out of context. The judge frowned. The context is on video, counsel. She assaulted a child. Karen shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward me and Emily, who sat quietly beside me in her chair, holding her teddy bear. Her lawyer tried again. She was under emotional distress. It was not premeditated. Yet she crossed onto private property, verbally abused the victim, and physically restrained her. The judge interrupted. This court sees no misunderstanding here. The gavel hit the block sharply. Bail denied. Karen's shoulders collapsed. Emily whispered to me, Dad, is she going to jail? I nodded softly. Yes, honey, for a while. But that's not what matters most. She looked up curiously. Then what matters? That she finally knows what she did was wrong. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones flashed, questions flew. Commissioner Cross, how do you feel seeing the woman who hurt your daughter behind bars? I looked straight at the cameras. No parent ever wants revenge, I said firmly. We want safety, not just for our own children, but for every child who's ever been silenced or ignored. My daughter can't walk, but she stood stronger than most adults I know. The crowd grew quiet. I placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Let this be a reminder. Power doesn't come from titles or positions. It comes from how you treat people who can't fight back. That line, those exact words, spread faster than the footage itself. Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Justice for Emily and hashtag HOA Abuse Exposed were trending. And just like that, people from across the country began sharing their own HOA horror stories. It became a movement, homeowners standing up to the abuse of power that had gone unchecked for years. Back in Willow Creek, things changed almost overnight. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Without Karen, they voted unanimously to dissolve her presidency and issue a public apology. One by one, neighbors I barely knew came to our door, some with flowers, some with tears. "Mr. Cross, I'm so sorry we didn't say anything earlier. She threatened to fine us if we helped you." I wish I had done something when I saw her yelling that day. I told each one the same thing. What matters is that you're speaking now. For the first time, our neighborhood felt human again. Children played outside without fear. The air no longer carried the weight of Karen's rules and fines. The street felt free, like it had been holding its breath for too long and finally exhaled. But while the world celebrated, Emily was still healing. Every night, she'd wake up trembling from nightmares, flashes of Karen's voice, that gate, that fear. I'd rush to her side, holding her hand until she calmed. One night, she looked at me and whispered, "Dad, I don't want to hate her anymore. I just want to forget." Her words pierced me. She was only 10 and already wiser than most adults. "You don't have to hate her," I said gently, "because hate is what made her who she is. You just have to keep being you." She smiled faintly and drifted back to sleep. That's when I realized justice isn't loud. It's quiet. It's peace after pain. Weeks passed. The case made national headlines, and eventually Karen accepted a plea deal: 6 months in jail, 2 years of community service, and a permanent removal from all HOA positions. Her husband sold the house and left town. The Whitmore name became a ghost in Willow Creek, mentioned only as a warning of what arrogance can cost. And Emily? She started drawing again. One afternoon, she rolled up beside me on the porch, holding her sketchbook. "Dad, look." It was a drawing of our house, the same gate, but this time she'd drawn flowers blooming around it. And near the gate, a tiny black and white cat named Buttons. "It's beautiful," I said, smiling. She nodded, her eyes shining. "The gate isn't scary anymore." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No, it's not, because you took your pain and turned it into strength." And as I watched her smile, sunlight glinting off her glasses, I realized the truth. Karen's punishment wasn't prison. It was watching the world move on, without her power, without her fear, without her control. She built her life around rules, but forgot the one that mattered most. Humanity comes before authority. Months passed and the seasons changed. The leaves that once framed Willow Creek in gold turned bare and crisp, whispering reminders of everything we had survived. But inside our home, peace had finally returned. Emily laughed again. Her therapy sessions grew lighter, her drawings brighter. The shadows that used to haunt her dreams were fading, replaced by the comforting rhythm of normal life, school, stories, and her beloved cat, Buttons, who never left her side. Sometimes I'd stand by that same iron gate, the one that once symbolized fear, and just listen. The world felt calmer now. No more threats, no more notes taped to the door. Just the wind, the sound of children playing, and Emily's giggles spilling from the porch. It's strange how one moment can divide your life into before and after. Before, we were just another family trying to belong. After, we became a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful they think they are, can rise above accountability. Karen eventually served her sentence. I didn't attend her release, but I heard she moved out of state, starting a quiet life somewhere far from the spotlight. Some said she joined a community center to make amends. Maybe she was trying to change. Maybe guilt finally did what no law could, reform her. For Emily, though, healing wasn't about what happened to Karen. It was about what she learned through it all. One evening, as we watched the sunset, she turned to me and asked, "Dad, do you ever feel sorry for her?" I took a moment before answering. Sometimes, I admitted, because people like her forget what it means to be human. They mistake control for purpose, and when life takes that control away, they break. She thought for a moment, then nodded. I just feel sad for her." I smiled softly. That's called compassion, sweetheart, and it's the one thing she never had. The following week, our story was featured in a nationwide interview. The reporter asked me, Commissioner Cross, what message would you give to people who've suffered similar harassment by neighbors, HOAs, or those abusing authority? I looked directly into the camera and said, don't stay silent. Silence is what bullies feed on. They thrive in the space where people are too afraid to speak. But the moment one person stands up, just one, the entire structure of fear begins to collapse. The video went viral again, but this time, it wasn't about outrage, it was about hope. Across the country, families wrote in letters, emails, messages, telling me how they finally stood up to their own Karens. A retired veteran from Arizona wrote, "Your story gave me courage to report my HOA president for harassment." A single mother in Ohio said, "My daughter watched your video and said, 'Now, I know grown-ups protect kids too.'" That was the real justice. Not the arrest, not the court case, but the ripple effect that taught others that standing up matters. At home, Emily's strength became my daily reminder of why I fought. One night, she asked if we could visit the community park, the same one where Karen once tried to ban her wheelchair from the playground area. When we arrived, the park was quiet, the benches repainted, the flowers blooming. Children ran across the grass, free and laughing. Emily watched them for a while before saying softly, "It doesn't hurt anymore." I smiled, kneeling beside her. "That's because you faced it and won." She looked up at me with her bright, gentle eyes. "No, Dad, we won." That moment, that single sentence, erased months of pain. Because she was right. This wasn't my victory alone. It was ours. It belonged to every family who had ever been bullied, to every voice that had ever been silenced, to every child who had ever been told they were too different. As night fell, I pushed her wheelchair home under the orange glow of the streetlights. The same road that once witnessed cruelty now felt sacred, like it carried the weight of redemption. When we reached the house, Emily pointed to the gate. "Can we paint it tomorrow?" I chuckled. "What color?" "Sky blue," she said instantly. "It feels happy." The next morning, we did just that. The two of us, brushes in hand, laughter echoing as the metal bars slowly transformed into a calm, beautiful blue. It wasn't just paint. It was closure. Neighbors passing by waved, some stopping to chat, others helping with paint. The community felt alive again, united not by fear, but by empathy. That evening, as we stood back to admire our work, I realized something. Karen thought she could build her power through rules. But real power comes from love, from empathy, from standing up when others stay seated. I turned to Emily. "You know, kiddo, the strongest people aren't the ones who never get hurt. They're the ones who keep smiling afterward." She giggled. "Then we must be super strong." I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after a long, dark storm. And for the first time since that awful day, I felt peace, not the fragile kind that can be broken, but the kind that grows from truth, justice, and love. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about an HOA bully. It was about a father's promise, a child's courage, and a community's awakening. And most of all, it was proof that evil never wins when good people refuse to stay quiet. If you believe that no child should ever suffer because of someone's arrogance, then share this story. Let the world know that kindness is not weakness, it's power in its purest form. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this story tonight? Globe Showing America's. Your words, your support, your voices, they're what keeps stories like this alive. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because every week, we bring you real stories of courage, justice, and redemption, stories that remind us all that goodness still exists in this world. Stay kind. Stay strong, because one act of courage can change an entire community.